Hello and welcome to The Navel Gaze, a podcast about autosexuality. My name is Tolly Botts. My co host is Aaron Terrell. And today we are very excited to be joined by our guest, Ritchie Herron. Richie, as I'm sure everyone watching this knows, is a public detransitioner. Um, Richie has been on a journey, a gender journey, some might say, and has, I think, grown to be an important and well respected voice among the gender critical movement, for lack of better terms. Um, I first came across Richie. I think back in your more anonymous days, maybe on your interview with Boyce, with Benjamin Boyce. Um, yeah, your story was very compelling and heartbreaking in many ways. And I think just kind of galvanizing too. I think a lot of people resonated with or felt a lot of sympathy for your story. And I think in many ways, I sort of saw you as a bit of a darling of the gender critical movement. And I'm sure that position came with pressures in its own right. And so, because of that, I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, but surprised nonetheless to see a couple weeks ago now, maybe a month or so ago, you released a really thoughtful, really nuanced Substack series about trans identity and autogynephilia. Not to oversimplify it too much. Yeah, and I thought in many ways that was just as courageous as taking your detransition public, and putting yourself out for all the scrutiny that entails. Because we all know that the TRAs are extraordinarily vicious. But Aaron and I have come to find that a lot of the gender criticals can be pretty vicious too, and so I do think it was a courageous thing to put that out there to a community that you are well respected by, that has some of them, at least a segment, has a pretty dogmatic stance when it comes to the motivation for transition and what autogynephilia is. And so I think, that's really what sparked our interest in wanting to have you come on and talk about the show, talk on the show. So I've now been talking for too long. So Richie, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Well, first of all, thank you, Tally, for that very generous introduction. My whole stick, just to answer and sort of consolidate what you said, was all about like pursuing honesty and truth, no matter how difficult that is, and sometimes takes a while to get to that place. And also, there's a lot of other considerations, as you pointed out, too, how the other crowd sees it. But ultimately, I was like, I want to be helpful to the people that are going to listen. I don't really give a shit about the radicals or the people who are like completely invested, as I was a few years ago, in transition and ideology, which appeals to a very autistic mindset as well. It's like I said I had a podcast recording in London yesterday. I drove to and from there because I don't like to be away from my cats, to be honest, and my boyfriend, of course, I should mention. And I sorry, I've just strayed off on the twinkle because I was just thinking about cats. That's Harley's fat little bastard, but that's my fault, and I am working on it.
You're
But
saying the trans ideology and it's a bit autistic, and that you had mentioned on the podcast yesterday.
yeah, God, I mentioned that it's kind of like a group for the loners and like the outcasts and the sort of the ones who sit on the wallflowers, you were saying, and the people who didn't quite fit in, the people who are like, I don't know about you, but I'm not saying you were, but I was definitely a last pick kid. Do you know what I mean? At PE and stuff like that, like physical education and stuff. Um, And I think it's kind of like a group for those outliers. And autism's very interesting because of its like sexuality is very interesting amongst the autistic community. It seems a lot more fluid and literal, and it's crazy what the brain gets to. And going back to why I was speaking out originally, it was like, well, first of all, I wanted to really warn others against surgery. Like, I'm never ever gonna have a good opinion of surgery because I've had, not only did I have a shit experience, but I had a shit diagnostic experience. And there are some interesting things that have came out over the last couple of years about sort of looking at my case in retrospect, and I thought, if I'd probably got somebody who like properly reviewed me and they saw what was going on and they took note of what I said, because I wasn't deceitful as the TRAs would say and lied to them. I literally was like, I really believe I am trans. I really believe that like 100%. And I needed to be sure of it. So I was like, I'm going to tell them absolutely everything. I'm just going to shed all, confess everything, just say, this is what I did. This is when I did it. This is what I was thinking at the time. And just be like, then they will be able to tell me if I'm really trans or I'm just got like some fucked up shit that I've been working through because, I was very late in life developer generally. I was like really stupid but really smart, like painfully naive. You could tell me something, I believe it straight away. You know what I mean? But equally so, I've got a very smart. I'm like a little bit of a enigma in that sense. It's like, how can somebody like so smart be so fucking stupid at the same time? And that's kind of like me generally. And that's kind of how I got here. But anyway, in that pursuit of truth, I was like, well, this is something that I've been pushed on. I've been challenged by Aaron, especially, and I really do appreciate those dialogues, even though it's not always been cordial. And I do offer my regrets at how approached. But I think, in my defense, there is also a lot of those pressures that you were mentioning before, a lot of saving face and a lot of narratives that you're trying to deconstruct. And I was like, look, I'm sick of this side bullshit. I'm sick of these groups and these allegiances that you're meant to hold on. I was just like, listen, I started with very little and it just exploded into something, and I can live without that. So, whilst I appreciate support and the approval of others, I guess I don't need it like I did before, if that makes sense. It kind of came and gone, and it's like, all I really care about is helping others who find themselves in my story, in my subtype, and we'll get on to types and stuff soon. In whatever that is, because I do think there is incomplete bits that like it doesn't all fully match up, in my opinion, but there is a lot of resonance with it. Like I think, like the Blanchard especially, and to an extent Anne Lawrence, have like nailed some of the core fundamentals. Like I don't think they're gonna really change much, but I do think there is some more to explore and maybe some more to come out of that. And what I want to know is it helpful? Is it helpful in application? And I kind of came to the realization, um, in a gender affirmation sense, this doesn't help because they don't bring it up because it counts as gender affirmation. So you may have this brought up if you weren't in a gender affirmation like model of care, because that is no question, and this is quite adequate in questioning. And the other point is, would it help people who maybe shouldn't transition, or how would they manage that? And it could be that you don't need to socially transition, but you may want to be on like a mild dose of hormones or something like that, and that might be enough for you. But I don't think these options are fully explored. And again, going back to honesty and that pursuit of truth, making sure I'm helping and not hindering, whilst also navigating that minefield of the very different perspectives that are like supporting and following me and half supporting. And I think people hate to like me sometimes too. And I can see that with some people who are meant to be very like, don't like your subset at all, but I kind of appreciate what you're trying to do. And I think that's just kind of what I got stuck in a rut of. But that is my spiel over you.
I appreciate that very much. I think with regards to your journey, again, I think like you said earlier, people get to the truth or get to understanding themselves over time. It's not immediately. Aaron didn't start his pursuit of trying to understand, gender dysphoria outside of a gender ideology framework right when he started. It took years of doing that work to even like really understand what was going on with these different populations of people, and also like what was going on for yourself, Aaron. And I also think a lot of people, like you said, are in a really tough position where they feel like they have to save face, and I completely understand that instinct. If you guys don't mind, can I very briefly narrate like what you were referring to, Richie, in there?
Yeah.
Aaron, that's cool with you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so in many ways, I think Aaron kind of became known as a bit of a crusader. I think when Aaron came to this truth, as you also kind of put it, and I relate to this because I came to it later than Aaron also, right? So then it's like you start to see it all around. And when you're not someone who's trying to demonize it, you get frustrated in the people, I think there's a frustration in seeing other people who are good, normal people who could help, beat the stigma or whatever, for if that's true or not. And so, yeah, I remember, I guess Aaron was speculating on your typology. And I remember a lot of people pushing back, you being one of them, Richie, pushing back against Aaron for this. And I remember having conversations with people, and I sort of understood both sides. I was like, listen, I understand why it's very personally offensive for someone to be like making claims about you, right? Or I'm sure it felt like prying very much too. But I couldn't get out of my head that like, but also I think Aaron has really thought about this, and I don't think we can really stop people from looking at patterns and stuff, and like trying to make sense of this. And so, yeah, I think it's like that's a hard line to walk to. But yeah, so that's what you were referencing, was there was a bit of a public discourse where Aaron was speculating that your ideology for your trans identity was autogynephilia, and you were resistant to that at that time. And that may have been, it sounds like it was, you didn't actually believe that to be true. And also, I think like a lot of people didn't want that to be true. Didn't want the implications of what that might mean if it were true. I want to know a little bit on what that process was like for you. How did you come to see yourself in autogynephilia? But I also want to see, Aaron, if you want to chime in at all before we go there.
Sure. Yeah. So it's really an awkward situation because I've been like studying the typology for a few years, had spoke to many people on the Transparency podcast, and then had just been observing different trans people and different detrans people, and the typology to me just seemed very self-evident, but I was coming at it from a place of just kind of completely neutral about it. But most of the audience I was speaking to about the typology were of the GC mind frame, and they thought of it as this dangerous, evil fetish, and not just this, as I think of it, as completely new. I know, Richie, you still don't think of it as being like a neutral phenomenon, and I understand where you're coming from and why you feel that way. But like from a just to basically completely neutralize it for the purpose of understanding the phenomenon, it is, in my opinion, just a incorrectly like a backfiring experience of heterosexuality, and that should be completely just like devoid of any external moralization. Yes, there are obviously ethical problems that can arise from this in a society, and that's a conversation that has to be had. But where I was coming from was just trying to understand the psychological mechanism at play here. And because I spent so much time studying it and observing it, and to me, it was just, I don't know, my whole crusade had been to educate about what are these internal motivators that lead people to transition, because that to me has always been the means of combating the gender ideology, is actually looking at the psychological mechanism at play, independent of the whole gender identity framework. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but so I was always very careful to not apply the typology to people publicly. But the situation I ran into I put you in a situation you were definitely uncomfortable with, and for good reason, Richie, was just the chronic, everybody constantly looking to you as an example of homosexual transsexual. And I felt like that was because you had such a platform and so many people believe this and were pointing to you and your experience as the HSTH experience. It just seemed like chronically in opposition to what I understood the solution to be, which was actually understanding the causes of dysphoria and the manifestations, the presentations. And so when you have this one really this person with a large platform, a lot of eyes on you, and that person being, in my opinion, clearly of one type, but people being, understanding it to be a different type, is where it kind of got into a position where it's further awkward just because we had a lot of disagreements about how you spoke about other people such as Ray and Phil who were talking about the typology. And that's where because I didn't like the way that you were talking about them, I kind of got a sense of righteousness about defending them. And therefore that came with, outing, so to speak, you or whatever. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling.
Okay. I hope, I'm really over it. Like, I'm just so over it. I'm just over bullshit and spats and shit like that. And, I suppose tiredness kind of got us to that place where I'm just like, I'm not really going to resist. I'm going to think about these things, but also there is a lot of personal friction that happens like across the sphere when you begin like bombarded by absolute fucking lunatics, like really crazy people, and it's very hard to keep your composure and to be introspective. And I don't know, and it's also the connotations that come in certain spheres is it's got a very strict meaning, and there is a lot of stuff where it's like, well, we can't possibly have this conversation because if you have this conversation, all of a sudden nonces are going to be a nonce in everyone. Like, and it's just like, no, that's not going to happen. Actually, that's very, very extreme. That's as extreme as any other talking point. But that's the problem. You're navigating with all these catchphrases and all these like beliefs and conclusions. But the stark reality is the people who I know who are like me, and I'm not just talking about other detransitioners, I'm talking about people still in transition or want to transition. These are like, some of them are very autistic, but most of them, again, are very similar to me, that very gentle spirited and like not really a violent person, unlike that. But I also can't deny the complexities of certain offending behaviors and how paraphilias overlap and shit like that. But in terms of going back to the example of the HSTS, I'm pretty sure I even said that in Benjamin Boyce because I believe that. I think that was the right observation. I think I believe that, or that was my layman understanding. But when I actually sat and read it, I was like, I am not. And then when you understand more, you're like, is there such a thing as HSTS? But also, I think part of the
Richie, welcome to the podcast.
the other part of me was just like, yeah, and I was just thinking, right, okay, let's think about this from like a a manifestation for you? Like, how does it manifest in reality, and what is the meaning of that? If I enjoy experiences with other males as a male, regardless of how I got there, that is the real world impact. That is the homosexual act, she was saying.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure somebody on my Twitter feed said there's no such thing as sexuality. There is just sexual acts, sort of thing. And I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me in some ways. But it was like, I still can't deny the fact that I am very physically repulsed by vaginas, and that really struggles with how am I autosexual or sorry, even heterosexual in some regards? But then I'm thinking, well, that's not strictly true now, is it, Richie? You've definitely had crushes on very feminine looking men and females themselves who have got that very androgynous look, which again is a type of heterosexuality. And I think there's this whole deal of semantics and the meaning and conclusions, and I'm thinking, right, okay, I have waded into something and I am way too deep at this point. Like, I'm way fucking too deep. And I was just sat there all of a sudden thinking I've got all these constraints, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Just fuck this. Fuck this. I'm just gonna fucking face this shit, because I'm also in this process of writing and it's been more of a therapeutic exercise for me over the last 2 years. How did I get here is the question I'm trying to answer myself through storytelling, through telling like certain life events. And the more I wrote about it, I was like, okay, yeah, I was a soft shit. Yeah, I was a bit of a mama's boy, but my God, I was not a feminine child. I was like, I had instances of doing stuff like want to be a ballerina and stuff like that, but and like playing as the teacher and wearing dresses, and I don't want to comment on like a child's sexuality, but I don't think that was like sexually like fueled. It was just something I really was really drawn to in a very more autistic sort of way as well. But to say that I was feminine throughout childhood, that's not true, really.
Mhm.
I was quite a boy. I loved trucks, I loved dinosaurs, I loved Lego, I loved like big fuck off huge machines, like massive cranes that are like just on these wheels the size of houses and stuff. And that used to baffle my little mind. And now I've got like absolute car autism. I can tell you like the torque, the speed, and the brake horsepower of cars and engines, because over the last year and a half I've just been absolutely obsessed over the topic. And it's
Mm.
like, I know to be stereotypical, men tend to have a more like that way of thinking. It's all about like structure and stuff like that, and that is a very male thing, and I can't escape that maleness side of us. And now that I'm in the other side of transition, I don't want to. Like, I like that, but I also don't really vibe with being a lad type. You probably don't really know the character, but around here it's very like sport driven, or especially around football or soccer, if you want to call it that. Fringe, I know, whatever. um and it's all very tough, it's all very like macho and all that bullshit, and I've never been in any of that. I've always been averted from that, and I've also been very like auto, I think this is the term, like auto androphilic, almost like hate any aspect of
Autoandrophobic.
that's the word, yeah.
Yeah.
I just can't stand like really masculine bits, but I do have like, I also accept that, I've my body's only got its limitations and stuff, but I'm not really like, I am masculine, but I'm not at the same time, and I'm like, I'm okay with this. Transition was too much for me though, like generally,
Right.
and that's generally what I think before even getting to surgery, because I'd mentioned assisting in detransition a lot before I got there, but I was always getting put on the path. It was really fucking predatorial,
Mhm.
actually, like looking back on the medical notes and they're like, well, you're an adult, you can do what you want. And they're like, you can, but you've also got these professionals saying all this shit to you, and you're now thinking, well, okay, I guess I am just this tune, honest, HSTS sort of type. I'm destined to transition, and I may as well, blah, blah, blah. And then you do that. Yeah, I have the surgery. I regret it, and that like sort of really radically sped up the process of detransition. I think if it wasn't then, it would have
Mm-hmm.
been 10 or 15 years. And I think what most
Mm-hmm.
people get to is, oh, this was all for nothing, and then they just kill themselves. You know, I think that is quite a common one of the like the people who are killing themselves mainly. I think there was a lot of like, well, this was all for nothing, and I've just made my life worse. And I kind of felt that quite heavily. I felt like
Mm-hmm.
all the good bits I'd given up for what, and I got very little benefit from it. When in fact, all I really should have done is maybe take some HRT and
Yeah.
see
Some
how I feel.
electrolysis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Definitely the. Well, I had laser because I've got like black hairs and that, so it was much
Mm-hmm.
easier for laser. Do that and then see how you feel rather than um doing everything else too extreme. But the autistic mindset, not to put that to blame, is very extreme. It is very absolute. It is very all or nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
I am a very 100-mile-per-hour person. You know, I am 0 to 60 in a few seconds. But yeah, I hope that ramble answered both points from you, and then tell us if I've missed anything.
Well, I just something came to mind. I'm not sure if you've heard this. It was something a tweet I saw years and years ago before I knew anything about like the different transsexual ideologies. But it was there are three genders: male, female, and autistic. And I think there's like some real validity to that. It's like, you know, autistic people very much struggle with just kind of just the things that are supposed to be kind of normal and natural for people of our actual sex. But then on top of, so it's you were saying how, you know, like you're not, you know, this really masculine person, you know, you've been like sensitive and soft, and that is also again true of most autistic males. And I think what we all got the misfortune of getting that early gender critical education, which was that the AGPs are these big burly masculine men who are just stomping all over women's rights and, you know, suck my lesbian dick, and like this big image of these really like kind of just socially I don't know, just like this narcissistic
Domineering.
domineering,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry
And
to
it's just
interrupt, Aaron, but
Mhm.
part of that is true, though. That's the problem. Some of them really are like that, and it is taking the most extreme stuff.
100%.
They
And
do exist.
100%.
yeah,
100%.
and, like there are some women who have been trapped like absolute garbage, but there is also a lot of how do I say this politely? There are neuroses on both sides, shall we say, and people who have been mistreated terribly by men specifically need an outlet for that, and that is an accepted outlet as well, and also for good reason. That like it's not without cause on wherever you look at it. And what I always try and do is try and well, I say always, what I'm trying to do now is try and pick out the human out of this and see it from
Mhm.
the human side. So that's why I did that series of the Autogyno files, which, by the way, I'm very proud of that name. I can't believe it wasn't taken. I was like, this is fucking perfect, right? You know, you've got the
Yeah,
Dublupa files, stuff like that.
that
Anyway,
was great.
and I was like, right, I need to talk to somebody who really understands the typologies and represents like a younger sort of mindset, and that's why I picked G. I need somebody who's quite public about their stuff, also young, but is in the midst of it. Okay, that's Anne or Annie. And then I also needed somebody who was impacted on the other scale of this, and that was Jennifer, the trans widow. And then there was just my thoughts and reflections. Some of the things that I kind of came to the conclusion with that, though, is that there is a danger of like obsessiveness in this as well, in the same way it applies in other facets like gender identity and stuff like that. And my worry is we're kind of in the hopes of offering a solution to a lot of these young men who don't know what to do, or they fall down one rabbit hole or the other. Is we're just kind of switching up sessions and the reasons and cause, but the output is kind of the same, like what actually really manifests. Um, But yeah, but also a lot of these people, like, and again, it could be what Aaron said about going back to the gentle autistic. Like, some of these are like the sweetest people you've ever met. Like, you know exactly what I'm talking about as well. Telling we're in the same Discord server. Like, they are not these characters that have been drawn up. And to be honest, I would rather really find what's right and true rather than what people want me to do. And it's like, I'm sorry if I'm letting any of the teams down, but I'm like, I really need to do this. I need to find the right answers. And it's not just about, well, like, helping people, but it's also helping me too. Like, there's been a lot of like peace in that. And sort of, how did I come to that? I think there was one or two people again in transition who I've been talking to for quite a while, and they're quite open to my critical point. And the thing is, unlike others in this, when I've kind of been quite critical of their point that they're making, they haven't like flipped the table as maybe I would, right? And that is something that kind of really needed as well, because of the connotations, because of not just the pressures. I'm not blaming it on the pressure, but definitely the connotations and meanings.
Yeah.
You kind of don't want it to be true, because the HSTS is this like poor gay man who had and it's like, yeah, I had a lot of homophobia.
Non-threatening,
Non-threatening.
more sympathy inducing, especially because in the gender critical circles, being LGB is very prized in some ways.
Yeah, I
At least.
would say certain. And also, there's also like this generational trauma, especially with the older LGBs occurring. So what they went through, they were at a time when people were researching the causes of different sexualities, and they were, all being labeled pedophiles and rapists, and all like, funnily enough, all like the connotations that are being put on certain subtypes, which is very interesting. It's like almost like a way of like projecting back to what's happened to them. And so they reject the notion of any natural inquiry into the reasonings behind it. But it's like, what? Well, that's pretty fucked up to go from 0 to I see I like the idea of being with a man when he sees me as a feminine male, or a soft, like, you know what I mean, that sort of thing, rather than just developing normal sexuality. Like, what the fuck happened? And then everyone jumps to, oh, you must have got like nonced or something when you were very little, or like abused and all that. And I'm like, I can't remember anything like that, really. I think everyone has like little weird, dodgy things, but I don't think I had anything that was traumatic or like bursting in my memory. But, and I was using the internet from a very early age, and I think that probably impacted it. But I think those things were already there, and it was like, like a seed getting watered, and the internet was like a garden. God, that's so fucking. Anyway, I'll stop because I'm just making shit up now. Just saying shit.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm inclined to agree with you. I think that's Blanchard's view also, is that this predisposition to develop these paraphilias, which start as fascinations, often non-sexual fascinations. The predisposition is there, and then you're seeking input, or if you're being exposed to it, then that's going to have a much more salient effect than someone who doesn't already have that predisposition, right? Someone without the predisposition for autogynephilia can cross-dress as a little kid, like we're all, oh, my sister's gonna put on my clothes and I'm gonna put on her clothes, and make nothing of that experience. But someone with the predisposition is that's gonna be something that they remember very fondly, that grows into a bit of a, again, non-sexual even fascination. and that reminds me of what you said, and you were trying to tiptoe around it for very good reason, that you're not going to comment on, children's sexuality. But Ray Alex Williams just interviewed Dr. Blanchard and posted that, I think, yesterday. Yesterday. And they talked about that, the experiences that Anne Lawrence collected, and that more people in the modern era, like that we all speak to online, have recollected, which is pre-sexual, pre-pubertal, maybe even like cross-dressing, right, or sort of pre-autogynephilic things. And Blanchard said, these things are literally not sexual, because in so far as the body cannot generate an arousal response. Like, it's not an arousal thing going on. And he used the word fascination, and I think that's also the word that a lot of people use when they're honestly describing their experience. Like, I don't know, from even from when I was 6 years old, I had this fascination with certain fabrics, with certain things. And he says, like, just because it's not sexual when your body is pre-sexual doesn't mean that it's not part of the same, like, machinery, in this, right, in the same way that sexual orientation includes lots of things outside of sex and literal arousal.
The way I always explain it is, like, you don't just build a house with one bit. It's built, like, you've foundations, you've got, like, the rooms, insulation, the wiring, the furniture, and then the windows. It's bit by bit by bit. And I kind of see that there are certain foundations that get intertwined with early puberty to late puberty, and then you have also a lot of pressures and stuff and stresses that draw you to that better time, that time where I was like, oh, that was a really, in the brain, it's like, oh, that was a really nice time, I want to go back to that because this really sucks. And this really sucks thing is normally the things that I think kind of coincide with high functioning autism, which tends to be a lot of peer rejection, bullying especially, and again, just being, like, different from everyone else. We all are different, but autistic people are extra fucking different, like, whatever you want to say. You're all saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, or speaking in a strange way, which is something I've done my whole life, like adding weird little things. Anyway, see, doing it again.
No.
One thing that Blanchard and Bailey completely did I do it?
You put it together.
Completely missed was the autism thing, the autism connection. Bailey says that he still doesn't see it, but Blanchard said all along, and so did Anne Lawrence, Anne Lawrence specifically said that most autogynephiles seem to have what was called Asperger's at the time, and Dr. Blanchard said that most of his patients were computer nerds, which today we would call that autistic.
Yeah, right.
But it's been a constant before we had the label for it, and now again today everybody's like, oh, these kids aren't they're gay and autistic. And I don't know. I think I'm not sure how much you've thought about this, Richie, but to me, I think the autism leads to the autosexuality. This is completely subconscious, of course, and the autosexuality leads to meta attraction, which becomes predominantly homosexuality. That's why I think there's this gay autism connection. I don't think that it just so happens that people are simultaneously gay and autistic. I think what happens is the autism is whatever, or it could be that whatever mechanism creates the autism is the same mechanism that creates the autosexuality, which is what most of the
And I think that's those intricacies that haven't been fully worked out yet. And I don't know how you even test or, like, really look into that, because it's all very theoretical. But I do vibe with the sort of the path that you've explained and laid it out, and I'm thinking in my mind what kind of happened, and it was like, yeah, that does seem like the right path. But going back to, say, me a year or two ago, maybe even less than that. My mindset was, well, if I'm having this very physical attraction that is obviously very real and it like triggers body responses, even though I don't have body parts, like I don't know, very depressing, whatever.
Yeah.
But I still have this very like strong sense that male plus male equals gay, and I can't override that. It's like a rule in a computer program, like if gay, sorry, if man plus man equals gay, and it's like no matter what, can't override this. So when you're saying, oh, like it leads on to this sort of heterosexuality to this like meta attraction, you're thinking, oh, so that's just gay but with extra steps, and then in my mind it's like, well, what does it matter? And then I'm like, well, actually, to challenge that's how it comes about. But yeah, but
Well,
so do you see what
we're
I'm
kind
saying
of,
then?
yeah, I think I'm really glad they're having this conversation because I certainly am. I think it's probably true for Aaron too, but I won't entirely speak for you. But we're in the boat that, yeah, it doesn't matter. It is still gay. I agree with you that your sexuality is made up of your sexual behavior. It's like if there's a gay man who has sex with 100 women and never even sees another man naked, is he gay? And like, what does it mean to call that person gay? Because his soul is gay? It's like,
Yeah,
like that's getting pretty, gender ideology esque. It's his true
but
soul
sorry
is
to
just like
interrupt you.
waiting to be unleashed.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
but tell it, yeah, but I can't also deny that what Aaron says is definitely true. Like there is definitely that, because I've experienced it and I know others have too, and it's like, man, that is such a mind fuck. Like you spend all this, like, just from my perspective for a bit, you spend 30 plus years denying your very, well, let's say 2.5 decades of denying, sorry, start again, 2/3 of your life denying your sexuality, and then
Yeah.
trying to understand your sexuality, finally understanding it a decade later, and then finding out you're wrong again. And now you're like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is happening here? Like, why can't I just like pick a lane and then go with it? But now I'm more like, actually, I see how I've got here. I see why it's taken so long. And now this makes more sense. And it's like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do with that? Well, one, the first thing I need to do is I need to correct the record for a start. I need to start talking about this in a way that doesn't equals.
Continue to muddy the water.
Yeah, but it also, I'm not like a researcher and I'm not an expert and I don't want to pretend I am, but I still do want to have those conversations and make it meaningful as well. So sorry, my mind's kind of on fire just thinking about all the different things that we're saying.
No, yeah. No. I'll keep going. You feel free to interrupt me, but yeah, I think what Aaron's saying, and again, this is what sort of one of the theories of me and Aaron's show here is that there are several ideologies for homosexuality, just as there are several ideologies for transsexuality or gender identity, just whatever you want to call it. That basically not everyone is just like feminized or not sufficiently masculinized in the womb and born a homosexual, but that they are nonetheless sincerely and authentically and physically, like you said, attracted to members of the same sex. It's just that that attraction is also wrapped up in their desire to be more like the opposite sex, right? That person's desire to be more like the opposite sex. And so something that's this is a little niche maybe, and I don't know how much people watching this show will be familiar with this, but you must what you said about like feeling like you finally understood yourself, and then it's like to realize I got this all wrong. And I don't think you did, but I think right, it was like the ideology part there that was missing, right? Because I believe you. I believe you that you are sincerely 100% attracted emotionally, sexually, romantically to men, and that you have no desire to be with certainly feminine women. I believe you. And so there's the two sides of these groups of people around you who I think you have probably meaningful relationships with and care about. And there's this one side, which is again the more GC whatever side, that is like, no, you are really gay, right? You're not this other weird, complicated thing, you know, that's just the sexologies, these weird sexologists and these weirdos. You're just gay. It was internalized homophobia that kept you from understanding this about yourself. And then there's the self-aware AGPs, the people that I quite like, that you know, that Aaron and I have found myself on that side of the internet, and I think you too. And like you said, a lot of the very sweet, soft, whatever, gentle people who, some of them are like pretty militaristic in their belief that metasexuality is not authentic, and that like that some part of you is essentially lying or coping, you know. Aaron and I don't believe that. Or again, I can say at least certainly I don't believe that. I think Aaron's with me, because that's where our show starts from. I don't know how familiar you are with my story, Richie, but my wife it desisted. Basically, she like came out to me with her, you know, lifelong dysphoria in her mid-30s. And at that time, I was like a total left-wing activist and a lesbian and like a LGBT, you know, whatever. And so I was like, I know what you do when someone comes to you with this information. You affirm them and you help them transition. And so I was like gung-ho, ready to do that with her. I had a big ideological shift. She kind of came along with me in that, and, you know, desisted, stepped away from the identity. But what got Aaron and I started talking was like the dysphoria never went away, you know, and we were being told like, well, this is a normal experience for lesbians. Some lesbians feel this way. It's like, okay, why, you know? And like, are we, you know, yeah, some lesbians feel uncomfortable with their bodies. Do most lesbians wish they had a real penis attached to their body? Like, I don't know like how just lesbian that experience is. And basically as my wife and I like just talked more about what her experience is like, it seemed like she has these sort of stereotypical autosexual features of her dysphoria. The one that was the most prominent that stuck out was the sort of, people call it like obligate autogynephilia, where in order to have any like fulfilling sexual experience or fantasy, you have to see yourself as the opposite sex. And when my wife told me that that was her experience, it was really shocking to me. And yeah, I mean, so then I went through the process of like, what does this mean, you know? And basically, I'm rambling too long now, but all that to say, I think my wife is perhaps similar to you in that, like yeah, she really doesn't want to be with a man. She doesn't want to be with, you know, she doesn't want to interact with another person's penis or anything like that. But is it true to say that she's fully repulsed by it if she would really like to have her own, you know? And like, is she repulsed by men if she would really like to have a male body, so much so that she has this autogynophobia where like she really just essentially avoids mirrors because it's this expected disappointment and follow through. It is in fact disappointing when she sees that she doesn't want to look that way, you know? And I think she's listen, she's good, she's fine, she's happy. Like I always make it sound, I don't want to make it sound so doom and gloom or like I'm holding her back from some transition, because she also feels like she's in her late 30s. She's lived her whole life. It is what it is, you know. We're in a loving relationship, and now that we've talked about the intricacies of this, there are ways that, like, you know, she gets to just kind of be the man in a relationship with a woman. She gets to have her inverted heterosexuality, right? And like doesn't need it to be affirmed by everyone else out there, because that level of paranoia was one of the worst parts of it, right? Like constantly needing to be gendered correctly and all of that, and feeling exposed if someone sees you for your actual sex. That's the unhealthy part. There's lots of, you know, unhealthy parts along the way. But so all of that to say, I think your type exists. And so it must be interesting experience for you to know that there are people of your kind, autogynephiles, who kind of diminish metasexuality. I don't, the words get difficult here, but yeah, they see it as like essentially not entirely true, right?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for that. Like I hadn't heard a full recap of your story, but it does sound kind of relatable in what you're saying, like an inversion of. And I'm using the wrong term there because inversion is a terrible term to use for this, but considering anyway.
Yeah, it's fine.
So, but like with your partner, I wouldn't dare comment on the like how lesbians feel. I would think you're probably better off asking like the women's side, but I can see that sort of from the male side sort of thing, and I guess I'm back caught up in that sort of, as you were saying, well, what is the impact at the end of the day, and how does that translate in a real world application? Like if I see myself one way, but everyone else on the outside sees it in a very strict black and white term, what is the application of that? And what does it actually mean? How do I live? But equally, I'm with someone who knows fuck all about autogynephilia and all this sort of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he is very much like secure in his sexuality. He calls himself bisexual, and he might be a certain subtype, but I'm not going to talk about his typology on this or whatever. He's got no dysphoria, no interest in transition and stuff. But he also kind of like sees me in the way I kind of want to be seen, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, 100%. But he also sees me as male, but it's like, do you know? And that to me was like being really fulfilling as well. And it's like, I think a lot of people need more options because the options are all very absolute at the minute. It's like, oh, you must like get imagine if somebody told your partner, so your wife, to get a phalloplasty because they had those feelings, and their pain and agony should be in now would be like extra like fucking crazy. And I'm like, you don't need to go that far. And the people who are like, oh, you know, I need to dress in a certain way, and I'm like, right, okay, that's fine. Just don't scare people, please, and don't like barge down the doors to these places where you clearly aren't welcome. But if you're of the rare 1% of the 1% of the 1% that is virtually finite, indistinguishable from the other sex, then this isn't even going to be a problem in anyone else's mind anyway. But you can't have that in a purist circle where people are delivering all these crazy talking points, where everyone's got the world figured out in a certain way. And I just think there is a lot of like missed humanity across the board for this, and it's become very personal and very like there's no growth, there's no movement. And I was like, I'm gonna again go back to like how I got here sort of thing. I was like, well, I want to be helpful. This is why I didn't do this just to sustain this one single talking point, which, you know, like I don't even feel that strongly about, you know what I mean? Like no one really ever asked me what I thought about things. It was just like I regretted surgery and I regretted a transition, and that was it. And then the rest was like sort of like, oh, so you wanna ban everything? You wanna kill trans people? And it's like, what this means that you were. And then on the other side, it's worse. It's like you're some reformed offender. Why should I trust you? And it's like you have it from all sides, but you also have that support. And what I worry is that support that becomes conditional. Like as long as you're saying the right things, and that's not what I want. That's fake. That's just as bad as being trans. Why would I want another inversion of that? I need to stop using that fucking word.
Let me say something quickly, just on that note. Yeah, you get the support as long as you're saying the right things, and like you said too earlier, and you might be believing those right things for a long period of time. This ties into like the sort of well, I have so many things in my head right now, but this ties into the sort of concept of the ROGD boy, and this idea that there are like the gay males who transition for the traditional HSTS reasons, that there are the autogynephiles who are the perverts, you know, who transition to go be closer to women in their spaces because they're just attracted to women. And there are the young, vulnerable boys and young men. And, you know, it's not lost on me that at least 3 people in the Lost Boys documentary have since come out as autogynephilic. And it's sad that had the 3 of you gone in with that identification, with that self-knowledge, because I don't think any of you had the self-knowledge at the time. Had any of you gone in with that self-knowledge, you probably wouldn't have received that support.
Yes, some background for that. That was around the time I started to really like. I hadn't accepted, but I was looking into it. And there's a bit where I say in the documentary I didn't know anything about autogynephilia because I started talking about it, but they only cut it to those like 5-second clip of I didn't know anything about autogynephilia. But I'm trying to remember what my exact words were, but I ranted on for about 10 minutes about the typologies and is it useful, is it not, and how I saw myself in them, but like also feel like it isn't a full picture and all this sort of thing. And then I realized like the other motivations that happened with the film, who funded the film, who featured in the film. Well, I can't say anything more than that. But there was also a motivation to have the narrative. Because I think what it translates to at the end of the day is they have parents have this kid who is in the late teens, maybe early 20s. I say kid, it is to me. I'm old. Apologies, because I think you're both like within my age range. I don't quite.
I'm older. She's younger.
There you go.
Probably like early 30s, probably.
I'm 30. Yeah.
30. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I shouldn't say anything else before I dig that hole.
Okay, you're 40, right, Aaron?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Aaron's actually old. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not far off yet. But sorry, where was it? In terms of sorry, I've totally lost my place there.
It's okay.
The narrative around Lost Boys.
The narrative, yeah.
Yeah, the narrative, the shame narrative, and all this. Like, I've never got on board.
I forgot about that. I forgot about that.
We can get on, and in fact, I don't want to get sued, but I've got a lot to say about that. But I was quite disappointed in the end, and then I was like, I'm not gonna like actively go out my way to promote it, and I want you to take out all the promotion stuff. But I would rather have just been cut from that when I asked, but they were like, it's too late. It's gonna cost too much money, and they just left it in. So I didn't appear at any of the premieres and like that, and just kind of not distanced myself from what I was in it, and that was it. But I was just disappointed some of the things that I said weren't in, and I couldn't understand why. And I was really disappointed with the narrative because the stories within it were sad enough, and some of the things that others had said. And I was just like, this isn't what I wanted. That was a really horrific feeling at the end when you do that. And it's a big letdown because you like these people who are shooting this with you. I don't dislike Jennifer or Carl Fell, who was one of the other producers, or I think the lad's name's Gary, if I remember his name rightly. I don't dislike them. These are lovely people, but I don't like what the end sort of message was around that, and the people who then later attached themselves to it. Like, these people came out of left field, and anyway, and I was like, what are they saying that is really helpful here? Not much, but anyway. So a little bit about that.
Yeah, right. And there does seem to be a real desire to form a particular narrative around male transitioners that they want to classify as
I remember now. sorry,
Yeah.
ROGD boys. So
Yeah.
I think this is where, like, for the ROGD template, it's very easy where girls kind of copy each other in social groups, and that's kind of whatever it is. And yes, that does happen. But with the lads, I think it's like they experience something where they find community online, right? Who all have this sort of like developed sort of auto heterosexuality, if you want to
Yeah.
say it. They don't know what it is. They
Right.
find each other and they're like, oh my god, we're the same. But they find each other under the like a false pretense, and this is where like they get sort of egg cracked and shit. And I think that's where there is an element of a very rapid onset. And it's like if there was ever an ROGD, that would kind of be it. But all that is you've got people who are, again, probably poor peer relationships, probably on the spectrum themselves, probably not having a strong relationship with the parent, and they may have also, and sorry, don't bite my head off if any parents are watching this, but they may have a neurotic parent as well, and they may not be able to have conversations with them without protecting their emotions, which is something that I've found that comes up quite a lot. And again, when I'm telling my story, I've been very careful what I say about family and stuff, because at the end of the day, like this is all about like my experiences for a start, and also when you talk about this, and I think you kind of touched it on the start there, Tally, is it sounds really negative, but it's like actually there was like a lot of good things that happened in my life and with my family. But if I talk about all the bad shit of how I got here, it's a grim story. And I remember my mum said those dreaded words. I watched your interview and I was like, oh my God, which one? Right? And then she would say, yeah, your first school wasn't a Catholic, it was Protestant school. And I was like, right, okay. Like, and it was like, it sounded like really negative. You didn't tell them all the nice stuff. You went to Florida. And I was like, yeah, thanks for sending us to Disneyland, man. That cured everything. Like, but at the same time, going back to ROGD, what I think is it's a rapid onset of people who are isolated, the depressed, the anxious, like so anxious, like holy shit, anxious city, and the very the comforted and by very like stimulating games and concepts and ideas, anime, and they all congregate together, and then all starting fucking HRT.
Yeah.
And what the parents see is this kid who was quite happy-ish from their perspective, is now all of a sudden spending all the time in the room 24/7, saying that they hate them, now saying that they want to be a girl and all this sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, I can kind of see how they got there, and I can kind of see why they call that ROGD. But there is certainly an element of a contagion, but the contagion is getting away from the loneliness and finding each other in an online environment, and then forgetting the real world exists because they'll come all like they spend all the time in the rooms. And I know that because I was that, I was exactly the same.
But wouldn't you agree that the underlying sexuality exists prior to finding these spaces, where it's then validated and told that it means you're this trans girl?
Definitely,
Yeah.
I would agree. I would agree that that seed was planted long ago, and I think what happened was it got accelerated when I found the term gender dysphoria. That was like somebody throwing like crack cocaine on plants, and the plants. And that was a bad example, but whatever makes plants grow like really fast. Not crack cocaine. Don't put that on plants, people. That will
I've been calling it rapid progression of autogynephilic gender dysphoria, which is not as nice, but
it's
not
like
easy to say.
ROGD, but with it, like a
Right.
different type,
RPAGPGD. Yeah, really easy.
Yeah, it sounds like you're about to break out into a song.
It does. But yeah, no, I agree with you. And you're right. There is what is similar about the rapid progression of the young autogynephiles and the ROGD girls is that they're being given the same script to explain their experiences.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They're being given the trans identity as the answer, some of them as the answer and the solution, and others just as the explanation, right, for their experience. Now, at least on the male side, it's slightly closer to reality, which is no, these feelings don't mean that you are a woman. They don't even mean that you're a trans woman, but they do mean that you have this atypical sexuality that is associated with the development of gender dysphoria and sometimes, transsexualism. Whereas obviously in the females, it's more complicated for the socially contagious kind of ideological transitioners. But there is that truth there that the culture is obviously having an effect and playing a role in the increase in numbers that we're seeing, including on the side of the guys. But I think it sounds like we're all in agreement that these are pretty much all autogynephilic, not all, but pretty much the majority of these young guys are autogynephiles who have been told. And it's so sad because when you go on Reddit and you go into these like ask transgender and stuff, it's a bunch of very obviously autogynephilic men feeling a certain level of shame about the erotic components of what has now developed into a little bit more than just an erotic thing for them, and asking, like, what does this mean? And every answer is, this means you're trans. This was my experience. I was the same way. No, it doesn't mean, it's not a kink. It's not a fetish. And again, and I think kink and fetish are really the wrong words to use most of the time when we're talking about AGP that actually develops into dysphoria. I think like the AGPs for whom it's really a kink and a fetish don't conceptualize themselves as autogynephilic even. You know what I mean? It's like they're not weighed down by the other parts of the psychology that come with the autoandrophobia, like you're talking about, So I think there's something part of the response they're getting, like it's not just a kink, it's not just a fetish. I think that's true, but they're being misled. Well, but it is part of your sexuality. And it doesn't mean that you're a woman.
But there's also arguments to be had that say somebody, even with like a meta, I would say I fit that type quite hard, the meta type. And you could even say that because of what it means that we experience very intense dysphoria in a sense. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But is it the same as transsexualism? I don't think it is. But I don't know how you even pick out the differences anymore. And it's like,
transsexualism? What do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think transsexualism. I don't think it exists.
It just
what
means,
do you mean by transsexualism?
Right. It's just someone who it makes a binary transition and commits to it. That's a transsexual.
Okay,
right? That's my definition. Yeah.
No, that makes. I'm happy with that. But okay, that makes more sense. But there's definitely like. Also, there are definitely like I can almost tell verbatim when I'm sat in front of somebody who is middle-aged or a gynophile, and I don't care what anyone says. When you're like this for too many decades by yourself, I think it just does something to the human that turns them into like very like boundary breaching creepers. And what that does is it kind of like muddies the entire water. So you've got this very quiet, withdrawn like guy who is now on the same level as this middle-aged dude who is kind of a bit far gone. No offense, but some of them really are like breaching so many boundaries, like especially with like younger or gynophiles or people who have got that disposition, whatever. And they do live through.
I've personally known somebody who fits that description, who is the totally normal masculine dude who, or at least, as they present in normal reality, suddenly they announce this trans identification and just become obsessed like creepo in everyday normal professional interactions. And it's just like, what the fuck happened to you? And that is what most people understand to be autogynephilia. And those dudes 100% exist, but they're like, as much time as I spend in like researching this, they are a minority. The majority of people who have this inverted sexuality do seem to be the awkward, nerdy, socially anxious, certainly not entitled until the ideology tells them to be entitled, of course. Yeah. But I'm wondering, what is the difference? What creates that former coworker of mine who, but then you've got the majority of, and again, even middle-aged, like I know a middle-aged transitioner as well, who 100% fits the demographic of the younger ones, who's always been really quiet, reserved, creative, just kind of effeminate personally before he transitioned. But anyway, like that's, so he middle-aged, but he definitely fits the demo of what we think of as like ROGD boy. But then there's the one who's like the creepo that everybody in the GC sphere understands to be and I'm wondering what is the difference? Because that dude definitely was not autistic. Like there's nothing autistic about this guy, the one I know personally. And so it's like, what is it that causes that? I don't know.
There's a lot to be said for personality disorders and just plain old people just being assholes, right?
Yeah.
You know? And I think this is also goes back to the earlier point of the gaps that need to be filled. Like there is a clear differential there. And one of the things I've always used to say was like there's a generational difference, but I don't think so anymore. I think like the way it displays is maybe generational. Especially what that person becomes fixated on. Like you can almost see the generational difference where you have the goth girl GF sort of types, and it's like that is very early 2000s, like or even before that, or like the sort of 80s aesthetic. And you see that now versus like the more modern younger people who are more anime orientated, who literally like kind of look like anime characters or try to be, right? And you'll see that difference, but the differential in behavior, like that is the thing that really needs to be cracked open, I think, because you say that's a minority, and I don't know anything about the numbers or figures behind who's or what, and you could well be right, but they are most certainly fucking vocal. Like they make their presence known, and they do
it's hard
that
to miss them.
in a very masculine way as well. It's like, look at me.
Yeah.
I am the center of the room. You will listen to me. And there's a certain litigious UK AGP Jeep Mega Hon that is very like they take out a lot of legal action targeted people. I can't say their exact name because they're a creepy pedophile who's actually been convicted as well. You probably guess what I mean. But they're still very like they put in a lot of legal complaints, and that is exactly the archetype. And then you run into people. I don't know if you've ever seen I Am Sam, like a detransitioner, very like much older than me, like 50s, 60s.
I don't think I have.
He lives in Scotland. He does videos anyway. He's a really nice person. And he fits that gentle sort of subset as well, not the creepy weirdo, but it is a very masculine, obscene thing to do. Like, do you know that guy who pretended to be trans for 6 months?
Right. Clearly motivated by AGP.
Yeah, we think he's AGP.
That dude has been wanking in like the whole fucking time. Like I'm telling you, he has been knocking them back. I can see it in his eyes. I bet you like those shots where he's like wearing the lipstick and he's got the chest hair. That's a post cum shot for sure. Like that. Like, and then everyone's like, "Haha, you got them, you tricked them, bro." And he's like, "Yeah."
Yeah, yeah, and it just also goes to show you, like, sorry, I do a lot of picking on the gender criticals because that's my tribe, like, but it shows just like how little so many of them have learned about autogynephilia, that they saw that and they were like, amazing ally, you totally exposed it and you are totally not just like them, and they also don't understand the psychology of the repressing AGP, because that manifests in interesting ways too.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. And yeah, like Kat Black, I don't know if you guys know who she is. Aaron, I think I've sent you some of her stuff before. She's a YouTuber, trans woman. Certainly like she's very woke in many ways. Like she believes in gendered souls and stuff like that, and she believes that AGP kind of exists, but that's just like the creepy cross dressers. But she just put out a video about Josh Cedar, and her thesis, I think she's like right, but she doesn't know why she's right, basically. But her thesis is that this was not a social experiment. This was a fetish for him, basically. And she thinks that he is actually very likely, you know, a closeted cross-dresser and an autogynephile. And she pointed out that like the outfits that he put together to wear in his videos were meant to be flattering on him. They were not just ridiculous feminine costumes. Like she pointed out, there was a lot of thought into the neckline and how wearing this would like minimize his shoulders and stuff like that. And that actually really stuck out to me because I think that's right. Like that there was actually something noteworthy about Josh's videos, is that he didn't look like a clown. He looked ridiculous and he was trying to be ridiculous, you know, but he also like was intentionally trying to be flattering, I think, with the feminine aesthetic that he was putting on. And I think that's because it.
Sorry, he's just got that oily, sweaty AGP look stare about him. Like I can see it glistening in his skin from here. I'm like,
yeah.
But you're right. Like, and it is a very good observation about like the way he was flattering. But it was also this particular photo sold it for me. It was the. You know what I mean? You know exactly what I mean.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Aaron and I,
every AGP has took a photo like that. Every single one, like without a shadow of a doubt.
Aaron and I have spent a lot of time talking about, or thinking at least about how, autosexuals quite love the autosexuals and self photography go together like peanut butter and jelly. And Ray Alex Williams and I were talking about that recently too. It's like the part of my sexuality that I feel like it is relatable to many autogynephiles was that aspect of my sexuality. Being very fascinated with my own reflection and taking pictures of it, and
it's narcissism.
You can tell.
Like it is. I do it. Like, oh my god.
I think narcissism.
Gallery, you would judge me so hard. Like
I think narcissism is the wrong word.
Really though, because it is an obsession with yourself and your reflection and how you're looking attractive. Why is it the wrong word?
Because I think I guess for one, the way we use the word narcissism today is narcissistic personality disorder, and I don't think that and I think there are lots of autogynephiles with narcissistic personality disorder. So let's put that out there. But I don't think that it reaches that level, and I don't know if it's more complicated than that, because especially for the autogynephiles, it is this narcissism, loving their reflection, also hating their reflection. You know, like it's they want the reflection that they don't have, and so that's got to be a painful experience, and to a certain extent too. You know, we talk about the, like the Huns and their like the angles and stuff, right? And it's like never trust the angle of a trans woman's picture, but it's like, and so they're loving themselves, and they're obviously getting something internally from like sharing these pictures, but also they would be horrified for a picture in the wrong angle.
Oh my god, I used to flip the fuck out when like somebody would get a picture that showed like the truth or the wrong angle, as you said.
Yeah.
You know what? Being like so public and being on like actual high definition cameras at various different angles was probably the thing that really broke like me down the most. Was like, holy fucking shit. Even in detransition, I've still been deluding myself. Like even in that way, like this image that I presented at the start was wrong and false. I was like, fuck this. Like anyone who is like in this, what I highly recommend is getting in front of a television camera and then really seeing yourself, like how you move, how you look, how you walk, how you everything about you. You know what I mean?
See, this is why I kind of, and I don't know how to say this without being rude, but I knew what your dysphoria experience is because even like obviously post detransition, you were still very emotionally invested in presenting a feminine image. and like all of your like the profile pictures and everything like that. It was like, and that's why it was so clear to me, and why I couldn't understand why it wasn't clear to everyone else. It's like of course, regardless of believing in the ideology or not, an autosexual is still emotionally invested in looking feminine or masculine. We see this. I can identify this in female detransitioners very clearly as well. It's not. It's just like somebody who's transitioning for autogynephilia or autoandrophilia, whether or not they're aware of that or not. Like in detransition, you're still going to have those same struggles of needing to be feminine or needing to be perceived as feminine or masculine. That's not going to go away. It's like are you saying basically like if you kind of like force yourself to look at the reality of yourself over and over again, you can kind of break that like that comforting delusion that's still comforting.
It's
Very
healthier.
painful. It's so
yeah.
hard, so difficult. Like the first time I ever did a documentary, because I've been very obsessive. Like this has been a special interest of mine, and you know what? If it pisses certain people off, I'll keep doing it, and you know that's a little bit sadistic side of me, and that's fine. But anyway, I did this documentary, and it ended up on David Icke's, who is this crazy conspiracy theorist dude who talks about like the moon being a radar dish and lizards, royal family, and all this sort of craziness. Anyway, it ended up on there, and I was like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" But anyway, I watched this documentary, and I freaked the fuck out. Like, I demanded a reshoot, and then by the time they did the reshoot, I'd put on even more weight, and I just hated my body, and I was just like, "God, why do I still feel this way? I'm in transition." And then I did a few more things after that, and it took about a year of this. And again, I've been very exposed, not just like visually, but like everything that I've like as Aaron, you'll know, like it's all been put out there in the public, and it's like insanely difficult to like battle against when where you're getting like sort of tugged in different directions because of the meanings and connotations, and then also your own understanding. And there's also like an emotional garden, and then you have like this reality breakdown in front of you when you actually see how you look. And now, like in reflection, when I look at myself, I'm like, yeah, I need to lose a bit of weight at the minute, especially because I'm not happy with how I look at the moment. But actually, like in terms of my face and presentation, I actually like this. Like, actually, that's not as bad as I think. And then it's re-kicked in that narcissism of, ooh, let's take some more selfies. Do you know what I mean? Just like that's an okay place to be. I don't think like
Yeah.
where things happen. Do you know what I mean? But
I think there's probably truth to just like, yeah, just seeing yourself so that you are just living more in reality, like desensitization as opposed to like you're suddenly going to love it, right? Or anything like that. But I
yeah,
think that, yeah. And I,
so can
yeah,
I
I
just
just,
say,
I don't think you're
so
a narcissist. That's
no,
all.
I definitely think I've got traits and stuff, but I
I
don't think
think
I
I
am
have
a.
traits too. Yeah.
You need to survive in some regards, I think. But
This is
And
why
I
we
think
call the
all,
podcast the navel gaze, because it's all
yeah.
about self-obsession. Like
well,
Yes.
there you
that's
go.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
was gonna say as well, my own self image has been shattered recently because I thought like because I see myself now as like a just a guy again, whatever. Everyone else will too, but I'm still in that same area of the country that I had all these fears growing up. I wear earrings. I've got a lasered face. I've got like sort of a feminized face in a way still. It doesn't look like one, but it's feminized. And people on the outside have very, very basic assumptions that, oh, androgynous means woman, right? That's what it means. And I was absolutely baffled when I'd been going to this corner shop for the last 6, 7 months every single other day without fail. And the other day, she referred to me as that lady. And I was like, what the fuck? And I was just like, that is just so baffling. And it also goes to prove, like, no matter what you do, certain people will see a certain way. And also, some people have got bad eyes. And not everyone has like this crazy Troon radar that everyone thinks they
Yeah.
have. But like
Yeah.
some women really like I think women have like a refined way of monitoring sex differences, but I think a lot of humans do. But I think when it comes to the guys, when a guy sees a feminine male, for instance, and there's like an element of attraction because they may have attractive features, and that invokes a sexual reaction, I think it also invokes a little bit of gay panic as well, kind of internally. And that all gets translated to, well, I'm attracted to them, so there must be a woman, must be a real woman. And you see this with a lot of like really gampish men out there who are like mega into well, like preoperative trans women and stuff like that, right? And they're very heavily invested in that without it being gay, and I think they can be very vicious allies too.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I've totally went off on track on that one.
I think we completely agree with you there that many of the trans activist cis, for lack of a better word, dudes are 100% gamps. Like they are invested in it because they need the men that they're attracted to be women, and that's their motivation.
Yeah. Well,
I have a question for you, Richie, if we don't mind delving into the past a little bit. You talked about like an internalized homophobia being a motivation for transition, and previously I used to not believe that kind of that internalized homophobia explanation, just because I thought it was just kind of like wishful thinking of the autosexuals. But I think I've come to realize, I don't want to answer this, I'm genuinely asking you, but to me it seems like no, there is a legitimacy to that feeling of it being internalized homophobia. But I think what it might more accurately be is autoandrophobia.
I think I was actually going to answer in that way. I think it was like a slight of that. So I definitely had worries about being gay, and I think that was part of the OCD as well. Was I don't want to be gay because there were a lot of very negative connotations, especially the areas and the sort of the culture and the time. People forget that the 90s and 2000s weren't very progressive as people think. It maybe was in Philadelphia, but it wasn't in the northeast of England. I can tell you that. This is like a minor ex-mining community that has been devastated over like because of certain governments, and these aren't people who are very in tune with like cultural development, shall we say. It's a bit of a time capsule. So there was definitely a worry of that, because I also equated that, well, I'm not like the other boys because I'm not really into rough and tumble. I'm very soft, and that was more the autistic side, right? That was more the gentle autist sort of side. And that all translated to, oh my God, I'm gay because I've now got these thoughts of being with my one of my friends who I was very attracted to. I was like, but those fantasies then started turning into very meta fantasies. Like I am the girl in the relationship, right? Ooh, and that was the way how I was meant to do it. So I don't think it was inaccurate, but I do think you're right. It was more to do with like the hatred of seeing yourself as a male, especially being a male, because I think I said that earlier on. I hated the whole seeing myself as a male with a male was as disgusting as seeing myself as a male. But being with a male, when I see myself as not a male, was absolutely the opposite. And it was like, whoa, that is such a mind fuck when you break it down like that. It's like, oh, so you're just gay with extra steps, because the actual real impact is it's two males together. So what does it matter what's in your brain, sort of thing? And I'm like, well, it kind of does matter, because it leads to all these assumptions. It leads to all these crazy actions. And it also leads to this sort of weaponized autism where you become very, very attached to a belief, and you combat anyone who will counter that no matter what. And you'll do that in whatever autistic way is fashionable. And we'll have the ways that comes out, but you become very, very attached to that idea, and it's hard to let go. So well done, Aaron, for persevering with me anyway. That must have been a tough 2 years.
Yeah, well, no, hopefully there's some, vindication, but really I think we're just glad to be able to have this conversation, and that more people, it makes me optimistic that people, even people like you who had so many reasons to never take yourself down this path, really, there's almost nothing in it for you, at least in your public facing life. It makes me optimistic that people can come to understand themselves and change their mind.
It's like, people are like, oh, you're a grifter. I'm like, if I was a grifter, I wouldn't like, do you know what I mean? It was like, well, actually, if anything, it gives you more authenticity, because it's like, well, I am doing what I'm saying I'm doing. I'm trying to pursue the truth. I'm trying to explore it. Yeah, I may not be as quick as others. I may not be as intelligent or as insightful as others, but I'm doing it. You know what I mean? And it's like, my danger, knowing me, is my obsessional nature. And what I don't want to do is go from, because this is the steps that I've taken. One, I started with atheism was my obsession for a while, and then it jumped into being trans, and then it jumped into being detransitioner who grew up gay. And what I don't want to then jump into is this new sphere of, oh, it's all because of autosexuality, and now I need to just live by this and all that sort of thing. I kind of want to be like, each one was like a valid jumping point, but I don't want to like just keep finding a new thing to be obsessed with. I just want to move the fuck on, and I need to process this and live my life in peace. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, well, I've kind of came on this long journey now. What's the point in like cutting off now? And I understand why people just leave straight away, because doing this work is very, very fucking hard. And I think it does lead down this route eventually, where you come to that realization. And I was like, I'd rather kind of like bring people in it. And if there's one thing I'm good at doing, it's admitting I made a mistake. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, why give up the things you're good at as well, right? So that's kind of another thing. There was one more thing on my mind, and it's kind of just escaped us for now. But it will come back. Sorry.
No, you're good. One thing I wanted to say is like, I think it's brought you a lot of good insight, though. You were saying kind of at the beginning of the conversation about how, like, if people understand what the motivation is, you don't have to go all the way. You can just be like, okay, this itch of my psychology or sexuality is satisfied by just this, or so like for you could be like just being the feminine partner in a gay male relationship. It's like that is the, that makes you feel comfortable in yourself. And that, if other people can know that about themselves, or if it's being, whatever it might be, like if somebody's AGP is, facilitated or satisfied by being, a hairdresser, even though they're completely male and live as a man, and like whatever, like just accessing femininity or living out femininity, or for a female, accessing out, or like Tali, your wife, being the masculine partner in, again, a homosexual relationship, that's the satisfaction, and that can mitigate, the overwhelming need to seek out surgeries or hormones, etc. And so I think, just imparting this information can be, because I think one of your concerns, Richie, is it's like, okay, is knowing it's this, how does that actually, because you wrote in the Substack, it's like a lot of the people who learn about the typology and understand that they're autogynephilic, they're like, okay, great, now I'll go into transition with that understanding. And I think you are rightly of the opinion is like, that's not good enough. Like it doesn't help to know this if you're just going to go off and because you're obviously, I think transition can be a pragmatic net positive for some people. There is a conversation about, is it ever ethical? I think that is something I probably am going to land on no on, just for medical and social reasons. But I do know that I think it does have a pragmatic net benefit for some people. But yes, in agreement with you, is there's just knowing this information about oneself does not then make transition like off the table. It can make people more confident in seeking that out. But I still land in the position that knowledge is always better. And if someone can have this knowledge and realize that they can live their life, they can, reduce their dysphoria by doing this or this, not this, and less medical steps or less permanent things, I think that's going to be good. Another issue is how a lot of the detransitioners talk about it, and how you were saying, like, oh, I'm in detransition, why is this still a problem for me? For those of us of our ideology, and I think the vast majority are of this ideology, it's always going to be a problem. It's always going to be there in the back of your mind. And just detransitioning doesn't solve it. And people need to know that as well in order to, successfully detransition. So I'm not sure if that was a question.
Yeah.
Just rambling.
I'm just to reflect on that. I do think there is still a lot to be processed for myself as well, because there is a lot of like valid things in what you're saying. But the way I've also framed, and this is the one thing that I've been quite consistently I agree with, is it should be down as a recovery from this absolutism mindset of this means that, therefore I need to do that, right? Or say these things, and that is a very spurgy thing to do. In terms of its helpful application, I think there is some application to it, and I'm still not where I need to be in working it out. I think it's still like swirling around of what does that actually physically mean and how does that get applied. And I think if that was applied in my diagnostic process, I think there wouldn't have, like, for other reasons as well, because I was fucking nuts in transition, by the way. Like, I was mental, like totally unhinged. And I was like, I think that should be one of the factors to kind of go against having surgery. But there are other people in the subtypes who are so autoandrophobic or whatever from their own genitals, for instance, that they may be like, I must have surgery because this is just like the whole thing of being, it resembles being male, but it also resembles what it means in a negative context. What does it mean in the sort of the context of sexual assault? Because I think that kind of gets intertwined with people's OCD as well, because OCD is a big thing in that community, and people are like, I don't want to become this thing, therefore if I remove it, the problem will be removed as well. And again, it's all about the ethics and the end game. And then I've kind of came to like this pretty sort of summary realization that this is too big of a fish to tackle by myself. Like, this is something that needs to be a big, huge group discussion without one person with that one prevailing narrative leading the way. It needs to be, right, we need to sit around a table and really fucking work this out. What's helpful, what's not helpful, what's rightful, what's right, what's ethical, but also remembering like the people side of it. And I say that, and somebody else comes in with that ideological point. I'm like, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm sick of like screamers now. I'm like, I'm past it. I'm back to that whole what is helpful, and because I think you two also have that sort of sense, and that's kind of where I realized as well. It was like, are they helping or hindering? I think they're helping, and that's kind of where I'm at now. And I think a lot of people do want to help, but they are also inadvertently hindering. Stop rambling, Richie. There we go. Ramble's over. And I've remembered one other point with and I think this may also be with like the mindset, the spurginess, but I don't know if you've noticed as some male detransitioners especially tend to fall down this religious sort of wagon. I don't know if you've noticed that. And it's like,
Sure have.
and that's kind of concerning in a way to me. Not like having religion, being religious is a concern. Sorry, that was my twink. I'm kidding. You escaped from the bedroom. I don't know why.
He got out. He got out of his ties.
I didn't give him any water, you see. Then I'm gonna have to have words anyway. Never mind. We can. It's good. It's good. We've been together nearly a year. A year. You've nearly been in the basement. Anyway. Yeah, I know. Go back upstairs. Okay.
Can I say something really difficult?
Oh no.
Please.
Yeah.
Worcestershire.
Nice.
Awesome.
God damn it!
Worcestershire.
I was really ready. I was like, oh yeah,
I
say
was ready.
something
I was shitting myself. Say, oh no, what have I done? Please cut this. I'm kidding.
He passed the test.
Yeah,
Passed the test. You did pass the test.
that's very cute. I just wanted to say that, yeah, I think about the ethics a lot. I think there are people in this conversation who have been harmed, who I agree with them about all the ethical considerations, but who I think are just there's something they are, and they're being a little unrealistic about the reality of putting the cat back in the bag, or whatever the saying is. I think so. While I wholeheartedly agree with Aaron that I want people to be able to understand themselves within a framework that allows for feminization or behavioral AGP or something without necessarily medicalization, I do agree with that. I think medicalization should necessarily be a last resort. But I'm kind of with you. I'm with you, Richie, on where you started in this conversation. And I've come along to this position in listening to more AGPs. I've become more sympathetic to the plight and the different manifestations of autogynephilia just by meeting more people. And I have found people who are living their lives integrated as men who, being on estrogen or being on some type of, anti-androgen is helping them. Now, do I like the framing that Brianna Wu goes with, where estrogen helps me because I have some brain, I have essentially like some intersex brain.
Lady brain. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
like,
no,
I hate that shit. Yeah, I hate. She's not literally saying that, but she is saying that. She's saying like that her brain has a literal. Yeah, right. That there's a response. Her brain is estrogen deficient in some way or something, and that she goes into like some type of whatever. I'll put her on the side.
The plight of the autosexuals is they say they are intersex, where they are actually into sex.
That's good. That's true. The intersex faking in the autosexual community is.
But they tend to be the same subtype who like knock everyone else over and overpower everyone else, and it's like, I have a medical condition. I'm like, no, you're just a cunt. Actually, you don't like it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think that we need to leave the door open for that possibility too. And again, it's not because the estrogen is feeding some part of their autogynephilic brain. It's that it puts them at ease that they have access to some type of femininity, that their body is going to change in some ways, or that they'll reduce some of the masculine aspects of their body. And like I heard of one guy who is taking both, I don't know the exact cocktail, but essentially like some type of estrogen or progesterone or whatever, and also a medication to block gynecomastia, because he doesn't want to look like a woman, but that he needs that, like the full repression of his autogynephilia, what felt like, a bad road to go down. And so I think when it comes to the ethics, the position that I've come to is that we really just need to put this into the realm of elective body modification, and because I don't think we should take it away from everyone. I don't.
I know, and I don't know why whenever I'm talking, like, I'm not saying you're doing this, but everyone comes to the natural assumption that because I am this. I stand for XYZ. And it's like, no, I've never said to ban anything because
Oh yeah, no, I'm not that. I didn't
no,
mean that like as a
no,
response.
no,
to
no, no, no.
anything,
But
yeah.
I do want to put that out there, and that doesn't also equally mean that I endorse the whole thing. It just means that I am pragmatic and realistic.
Yeah.
And do I think it should be state sanctioned? I really don't think that's a good idea. But going back to the hormones, there was also a very good explanation for this, and it's all to do with the impact of estrogen and serotonin levels. Because it's quite well documented that people on the autism spectrum, bringing it back to the autism, tend to have lower serotonin, normally from high stress, because of like the autistic life is stress and anxiety. And then you get this thing that actually increases and encourages serotonin production, especially in the gut, which is also why a lot of them have like upset guts and things having periods. And then that
I was just
does
gonna
help
say,
with
you mean periods?
yeah, and they have like the whole for organophilic, so that's another discussion completely. But I do think it's not just that sort of, oh, I'm getting away from the autoandrophobia. It's also to do with the fact that I physically feel a lot calmer when I don't have this raging hormone going through my body that is like I just can't fucking deal with. Like I've tried to, like I've been back on testosterone and I've had a terrible fucking time.
Right.
And I think because again of the very absolutist mindset, some people, especially who have detransitioned, go, "Oh shit, I'm now back on estrogen, so that means I'm trans again, and this is all a
Right.
mistake." And I actually do have it, and I can see how people fall down that trap. And
Yeah.
I think it was a very it was a smart move on my part not to stay on the testosterone. I think that would have been catastrophic, like
Yeah.
generally.
Yeah, I think post SRS taking testosterone is just self abuse,
Punishment.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It is because
Unnecessarily.
it is, and like who I was asking myself, who am I doing this for? Because it wasn't for
Right.
me.
Mhm.
Right.
Like, do I really care that much about this other people's narratives to do this? And I was like, I don't.
Yeah.
Do I really care that people are like, "Huh, you're still on estrogen, so that means you're one of us, and you're just a Russian propagandist, grifting Nazi type?" And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's the reason behind it. That's the reason you've got me sussed.
Yeah.
But it all in all has been very frustrating, and I do find like some of the like sort of organophiles in this have been some like really unhelpful, but most of them have been very patient and calm, especially people screaming in the face. But there are some who use it as a shield to do whatever the fuck they want anyway, and I don't think that's all right. I do
No.
like the approach of the younger ones who are like, I'm not going to use like a women's toilets, and it's not because I don't like think I don't blend in when they probably do or anything like that. It's because there is an ethical consideration for them, and I'm kind of with them on that standpoint because I do think it's went all too far, and unfortunately, yes, some of the quote unquote innocent ones are going to really pay for that, and they are going to have to give up some things for a little while until we figure this shit out. But it's just went too
Yeah.
far.
The compromise is a really tricky thing that I think about a lot, especially because like my mind has changed so much about this stuff in the different like iterations of my beliefs about all of this. Like, you know, when I was first peaked at everything, I was very much like, we really should be banning all of this pretty much. Not because I want to punish the individuals, but because I think it's harmful and unethical and we don't have the data and all of those same reasons that all of us share. And then the more that I've gotten to understand autogynephilia and the different people who are experiencing severe distress about their sex body, you know, persistently, then I kind of came around on the other end, like, well, no, I really do want my friends now, right? People who have become my friends. I want them to be able to have access to these things. I don't actually want to ban them. But it is really hard to find what the compromise is, because I think it's almost like, not to be flippant, especially with you, Richie, who had such negative outcomes surgically. But I almost want to live in a world where basically anyone can change their body, not just whenever they want and with no, you know, guardrails, but where like anyone can change their body and no one can lie about their sex, you know? It's like we need to get back to reality. Just living in reality, because the problem with all the bad behaviors and stuff is that trans women are women, you know, and like society is going along with that, and society now punishes the female who complains about, you know, the male in the dressing room and not the other way around. And I agree with you. Are there going to be innocent people who get caught up in this? You know, the classic transsexuals who are just living their lives trying to blend in. Yes. But I think that might be the price that we have to pay. And I do think that actually we will get around to a more, I hope at least, that we'll get around to a more accepting society if people don't feel like they're being told what to believe and what to say. You know, it's like I'm more likely to correctly pronoun somebody who's not forcing me to.
Yes. And also, it's going to be a natural instinct anyway. And you can't I think the problem is compelling people's speech generally just doesn't sit well with me, because before it meant being an absolute fucking retard, I was quite a libertarian. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was very much like live and let live, do what you want sort of thing, blah, 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 blah. But I think as I've got a little bit older, and it's very natural for people to do that, I get a little bit more conservative. But I am still of that I do have very libertarian values, just not like the ones today who seem like it's just some form of way to like abuse people. Like, some people are really fucking nasty about it. And going back to like, so say, and I'm trying to be careful not to be too bitchy when I talk about Brianna Wu, but this motherfucker thinks that no one knew they were trans, and I'm like, bro, like, you showed a picture of your hands, like, those shovels ain't hiding shit. I'm sorry, bro, and I think also Brianna came from a time where there wasn't this conversation and all the sort of thing, and it was much easier to pass by unnoticed or unassumingly because it was out of the conversation. And I think that had a compounding effect where Brianna really, really does believe that they passed, but I don't think Brianna is the type of the person who can move this forward. Actually, I think Brianna themselves, because they have started speaking a lot, I think they are absolutely the wrong person. They're recycling old talking points.
Yeah,
And,
she's deluded. I mean, she's 6'4", and in the last week she's tweeted at least
What?
5. In the last
I
week
think
she's
two. I
tweeted.
think 6'2".
I think she might be taller than 6'2". All right, either way, that's
Yeah.
pretty tall.
6'2" is stacking high.
And she's been tweeting every day this past week that if she were to go into a men's restroom, she has literally been saying, I would be raped
within a week.
Within a week. See? We have it. And it's just like, you're not living in reality.
How much of that is concern and how much of that is like an autogynephilic fantasy playing out in
it's the autogynephilic. Yeah, no, I think it's that, because I actually think she has become more. She has actually like I think she's also a partisan hack in many ways, but I do think she's had a sincere evolution in how she understands trans ideology and like the politics of it all. But yeah, it's absolutely a self-flattering autogynephilic delusion to believe that I was always dating straight men, and I look like such a fuckable woman that if I were to go into the men's room, it would be over instantly. And that's the thing too, is like, again, I wouldn't be raped just by walking into a men's room. That's not how it works. I've been in men's rooms
famously,
before.
most men in the men's toilets are having a piss or really need a shit. The last thing on their mind is like, hope a woman comes in where there are other men in here with all their body orders and their terrible hygiene. This is the place. This is it. And it's like, what do you think this is? Like a gay truck stop? Like, I'm sorry, it's not. It's a fucking restroom. No one's going to be doing that. And I think what Brianna really wants to get away from is uprooting their perception of self. And to make those concessions is impossible. But again, not as I'm in the bitch session with Brianna, because I started this, I think what really lost a lot of respect from them is when they were almost praising India Willoughby, who is a rampant, raging, horrible activist who does everything in the most narcissistic way, actual narcissism.
Yes.
And I'm thinking,
also fully delusional.
Oh yeah, and I'm like, this is what's happening. They're in group chats together talking about this, coming up with these corps, and they're so unhelpful. And this is why we're getting these old talking points, because it's all like, "Woe me, I'm just the poor uwu trans woman who will get really attacked in the when's womb. I can't go." And it's like, yes, you can. You're fucking a
Yeah.
unit. You're 6'2". I've seen those hands. I've seen.
Yeah.
Sorry, that is a bitching statement. No, I should stop. Anyway.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I agree with you. We'll see if we keep this all in. I've been
I don't
well,
blame you.
I've been rattling the bear with Brianna Wu lately. Not that I don't think she has any idea who I am or anything, and she obviously is not a listener to the Naval Gaze podcast. But yeah, I've been very frustrated, and I think I'm frustrated too because there is this active retconning. And so if you just like take a look at Brianna Wu's Twitter history, she's previously called herself bisexual. She's previously spoken about her interest in the female form, and yet now that she's gotten the mic as like the reasonable based transsexual, she's suddenly an HSTS. And she is now saying that she was always exclusively homosexual, that she was in fact a twink. And it's like, you were calling yourself bisexual on this very platform, Miss Ma'am. And so I don't appreciate that. And I think like in many ways, AGPs retcon their history unknowingly, like it's not motivated, they're not trying to lie, right? That feels like just a fucking lie. Like, you obviously know that you called yourself bisexual. You didn't forget that a year ago you called yourself bisexual. That's not what retconning is, right? You are just trying to craft the narrative, and I don't appreciate it. And I think she's trying to walk this line where, like, first of all, I have it on good authority that she knows that she's AGP, which makes me even more resentful of this little song and dance here. Because she's trying to sort of do the AGP acceptance thing. Like, she'll talk about my AGP trans friends, you know, like they were eventually able to lose the sexual stuff and assimilate into, you know, like just be a normal woman like the rest of us. And so she's doing a little bit, I guess, to help with that. But also she's lying about herself to try to make herself the preferred type of trans. And even like the other day on Twitter, I got into a thing with her. She was talking about GAMPs, and I said, like, GAMPs are someone whose ideal sexual target is a feminized male, you know, maybe an especially feminized male,
like a partner, for instance.
Right. And I don't even like, I really don't do attacks like that. But I said that's what it was. And she was like, yeah, I think it's weird too. And I was just like, I don't think it's weird. And also like, huh? And then she wrote this whole thing, like even, you know, I've always dated straight men. It's like, again,
Have
you were dating men pre-op, and you're 6'4".
They were always straight. Wow.
Yeah, that's just, and again, it's like, and then I get annoyed because then I get in this position where it sounds like I'm being nasty, and I guess I kind of am. But my whole point is, it's fucking fine. I'm very glad. I'm glad that there's people out there who are into, like, I'm glad that everyone's got a match, you know, that for every like body type, there's someone out there who we can say fetishizes it, but that's their erotic ideal. That's exactly who they want to be with, you know? And so I'm glad that exists, but let's just stop fucking obfuscating all the time. That's the one thing that has really stuck with me from my peaking is like, I hate all the euphemisms. Like, I hate all the lying and the, like, let's just, I just want everyone to live in reality.
I think everyone wants to be honest, and the worst is when you are like, even going back 2 years ago, I thought I was being honest. I wasn't like actively trying to deceive myself, but there was also part of me going, that's not strictly true, is it though, Richie? I know you believe that, but there was just always that part of us, like, kind of the doubt in knocking on the back of your head, and I was like, fuck you, that's just a feature of my life, go away, right? But you know, and I think Brianna might be going through the motions, and I hope like there is like definitely a discussion with self where they do say that and why they've said it, because just saying it isn't enough. You really need to understand the implications and the whys behind it. But also, I think, judging from what Brianna's also said, I think it may have a lot of implications for her friendship group, possibly even career stuff. Like, it, who knows what sort of lines they're doing. But if you can't do it, don't do it. That's sort of my logic. Like,
Right. Don't just
you,
lie instead.
exactly, just fuck
Yeah.
off. Let someone else do
Yeah.
it. There are people who are willing and able to do that. And if you're just
Yeah.
going to take the mic to talk about how fucking hard your life is, I'm sorry. All of my empathy and sympathy is reserved for a very precious few at the minute. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's kind of worn out. The reserves are running dry. And you're out here trying to tap into empathy that is 10 years too late for the ooey. We're just trying to live our lives. I'm sorry. Like, we all are, but
Mhm.
we can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, Brianna Wu. I'm sorry I've like put all that narc rage your way or whatever, but you know, you need to fucking sort your shit out if this makes
Yeah.
the
Yeah, just come to the dark side, Brianna. Just you're so close. Just be a little more honest, and you
Yeah.
would earn a lot more respect.
I've got nothing to do with being jealous about that Porsche GT, like naturally.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything
Awesome.
else? Anybody?
We may as well discuss Hamas.
No, we're
There are two
explicitly
topics that don't discuss
Switzerland here. Yeah, exactly. I'm not Switzerland. I'm very partisan in the Israel-Hamas stuff, but we just don't talk about it here.
I got asked about that, and I was like, "Why the fuck are you asking me? Do I look like I could spell any of these countries that you're talking about? Like, ask somebody who knows. Like, dude, this is a big problem. Everyone's opinion is to be heard and tolerated. I'm like, it's not. You don't want to hear my opinion on Israel and Palestine because I know fuck all about it. That is the honest truth. Like, I am way out of my depth on that one, and there's no fucking way I would ever talk about that shit. And I wish more people would have that stance on
That's
a
exactly
lot
what I was going to say. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I don't blame people to a certain extent, because especially if you are anywhere to the left of center, you are there. The pressure to speak is there, like, very explicitly. I don't mean people are feeling the pressure because other people are talking about it. I mean, your friends in your circle are going to be saying your silence is violence. You have the privilege to sit here and you're comfortable with, and you're not blah, 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 blah. And so there is pressure for people to have an opinion on something that they don't know anything about.
No real friend would do that to someone. That is
No.
like, I kind of feel like it's giving people like the sociopathic like ability to just carry out all their pent up anger and injustice and righteous indignation as to like to shit on
Narcissism.
others. Exactly. And it's like, who the fuck are you, right?
Yeah.
Our shit both stinks, I bet. You know, we're both drinking the same water and air and breathing the same air. So, you know, like, I don't know any better and you don't know any better. And if you did, then go fix the scenario. Don't come back with any more catchphrases. But I'm a big believer of change what you can, like what's in your sphere of control. And I think this is in my sphere of control. But
exactly
Israel,
how I feel about it.
Yeah, Israel Hamas is not.
It's the healthiest way to be.
It is.
Like what?
Otherwise
It's very unhealthy to focus on things that are very literally out of your control. I mean, we just know that what that leads to when you ruminate on things like that. But okay, this was great. I'm so glad that you came, Richie. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, and I'm glad that we all got to have this chat.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I hope it gets received well. Let us know when it comes out.
Me too.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Good to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.